My name's Tim. I'm from Argus Media, we provide commodity market intelligence, which basically means news, costs, prices, and data. We're a knowledge partner for this event, and we have a stand over by the Canada area, over in Hall 2, if you want to catch up with any of my colleagues afterwards. So today what I want to talk about is a low-carbon ammonia benchmark. I think that there's been an awful lot of discussion at this event and at previous events over many years about all sorts of elements of how to stimulate supply, how to stimulate demand, how it can be transported, how to lower costs, et cetera, et cetera. Certainly at this point of the market, what's clear is that we can't be always talking about the future. It has to arrive. And offtakes are something which just aren't discussed enough because they're fundamental and completely necessary for projects to proceed. So I'll start off with just a little bit of sort of background. If we consider the White Rabbit, who's always late from Alice in Wonderland, I always think of green hydrogen as the late rabbit, as it were. It's really key timing when you're trying to bootstrap a brand new industry. And it's funny because a lot of people who know that I work in hydrogen, they say, oh, you work in hydrogen, are we there yet? And the answer is no, we aren't there yet. There's very, very little that's been signed off in terms of FID. Supply is very low, really limited to basically what the pilot projects are. And there have been reasons for that, of course. There's been COVID interruptions, and there's been the Ukraine disruptions as well, and those have acted as a drag. But where we are today is that initial conditions have shifted, and they've shifted because I would say that this is a good example of the way that it shifted. So looking at Europe here, but very much emblematic of anywhere around the world. On the left-hand side, you see green hydrogen output expectations at 2030. So you saw those were quite lofty in 2021, building in 2022, but by last year, they'd shrunk from about 130 gigawatts installed at 2030 to around 83, so quite a big, significant pullback. At the same time, on the right-hand chart, you can see that what had happened is that over the same period, blue hydrogen projects within Europe were multiplying in the number of projects that were coming through, and the volumes, of course, were rising as a result. And I think that's, as I say, emblematic of what's happened generally in hydrogen markets everywhere. Initially, all news was green, with a very small scattering of blue hydrogen, blue ammonia projects. As we've come closer to, well, I suppose, FIDs being assigned, the commercial realities of things, economics has weighed on lots of off-takers, and willingness to pay seems quite absent. In short, people are looking more towards the blue products at this point in the initial stage of rollout of hydrogen than they were when we were looking back at 2020, 21, 2022. At the same time, the apparent size of the green projects which are coming through, really driven by subsidies. The other side is that the willingness to pay, they really have to be in the top right of the chart, these kind of people that are looking for green hydrogen supply, mainly because they have to be willing to pay a premium for that. So as I say, implementation's coming closer and costs loom larger. And that willingness to pay is it's crucial. Just generally speaking, look at this chart on the right. This is looking at long-term trends for ammonia. I've got the grey and the blue costs up here. At the top, we can see that in Europe, there's no advantage to producing grey ammonia relative to blue for brand new assets. There really aren't, mainly because of the ETS scheme. The USA does show a marginal improvement, but that's taken away by the 45Q subsidies. And in Northeast Asia, it's cheaper to produce grey ammonia or hydrogen than blue because carbon's so cheap. Wherever you are on that scale, though, blue has a massive cost advantage over green for ammonia production, whether it's in Europe, the US, or Northeast Asia. And it's that economics which is really driving people's, or first movers, demand for blue products. What we do find, though, so the rubber's meeting the road now in terms of offtakes. So we see examples in Northeast Asia, particularly Japan and Korea, who are targeting, say, 3 million tons a year of ammonia imports by 2030. And that's predominantly for co-firing in power stations to reduce the carbon intensity of power production. What they're offered, though, is a rather unappetizing series of choices to make. So if we look at, say, for example, ATR, autothermal reformation of natural gas, there's lots of things to consider on there. There's the gas price, there's the CCS cost, and the rate of actually sequestering it. CO2, there's power, there's all sorts of things in there. And what people are being asked to do is to go off and bilaterally negotiate a contract around that. And it's not a contract that just lasts for a year. It's not like a mobile phone contract. These offtakes are going to last for 10 years and probably 15 based on all the conversations that I've been having. So that's a very long-term relationship. And it's also one which can't afford to have too much trouble in it because these are monopsony markets. Facilities will be coming online to supply an off-taker. If there are commercial tensions between the two, that's going to make everything very, very difficult for both parties. At best, it means renegotiations, etc. Even worse, I would say, is that all the companies that are looking at taking off-takes are blind. They don't know what their competitors are doing. So have you selected the right levers to pull in your off-takes? It's impossible to know. These are very closely guarded commercial secrets. And so it's a very, very challenging area for anyone to look at doing this. So as I say, there's a huge amount of hydrogen and ammonia that has to be priced in the near term. And unless we get those off-takes in place, there will be no FIDs, and there will be no supply. As I say, what's being offered in this range, whether it's green products or whether it's blue, it's a selection of cogs for people to try and muddle together an off-take mechanism from, which is a bit challenging. If people are doing this, if they're negotiating formulas, each one will be bespoke. Each one will be completely individual. And no one will know what's in there. They're proprietary, basically. And Colonel Sanders isn't world famous for giving away his secret recipe. Neither is Coca-Cola. So their secret sauce ingredients are carefully guarded, and the proportions of them equally are. And it's that gearing on each of those individual elements which is really going to drive landed costs apart relative to one another. So that's basically where we're going to end up if all things are equal as things are standing at the moment. So a wall of formulas, which are just behind the curtain for each company, very, very challenging. A nightmare for the individual companies, the off-taker and the provider, but also for anyone providing subsidies to these people. It's very, very, very hard to actually manage that. And what we're asking for is more and more, because obviously we're not just doing some projects, there's many of them more coming. Examples come from all different sort of areas, whether it's green or blue, but the same is true. So what we've looked to do is to build a market instrument, because that's what people want. They don't want a bag of cogs. What they want is a single reference to market against, to have their off-takes linked to, or to form a base against which to negotiate a premium. And we're producing one now, which is coming out. It's called the Japan-Korea Low-Carbon Ammonia Benchmark. And what we think it will provide is something as a useful and common base for people to start negotiating off-takes around. It'll obviously provide a very clear market signal for blue ammonia, but also for green. And it should do the same for hydrogen as well. I'll give a very brief sort of look back at why I think this is important. So if you look back at, this isn't the first industry that's had to scale up from nothing. The LNG industry was here in 1969. Obviously, it's really taken off very obviously in recent years, but it had to start off with long-term offtakes as well, and some of those are still rolling off at this point. What it wanted to do, really, as they're looking on the left-hand side and looking to scale up, they had to sign offtakes, and what obviously was ideal was to have something which is LNG-based. At the point that people started to negotiate, it was quite clear, quite obvious. There is no reference in this market because the market doesn't exist. And so they started to look at alternatives, proxy markets, gas and oil. So those were the ways that the conversations developed there. Then each of those individual companies went off and did something bespoke and individual in terms of their linkage there as well. So if you looked at gas, some people were linking to TTF in Europe, some people were looking at Henry Hub in the US, NBP, all sorts of different references in there. The same is true for oil. Lots of Brent linkage and lots of linkage to other markets. As those offtakes rolled off, people were very keen to be able to manage price risk, to sign new agreements, and to have something to market with, a benchmark. What was obvious, though, was that the one thing that they didn't have was an LNG market reference. And so that was very, very challenging for everyone. And it's only now that we've got all these linkages for gas products, for oil products, that people are saying, can we perhaps do one for LNG? So 1969 to 2024, that's a long gestation period. And I think it's something that can easily be avoided with a little bit of forethought by early market pioneers who are looking now at structuring offtakes. We can have an orderly development of the market, but it won't come naturally. It has to be approached very mindfully. The way really to do that is that it's at this initial point on the left-hand side. People are looking for offtakes now. Oh no, what can we do? There's no trade that exists. It is far better at this point to look at linking to either a hydrogen or ammonia reference rather than something else. Otherwise, we're going to have a real shoulder to get off of in 2035. Why are we still linking to natural gas? Why are we still linking to something else? If people can look at the cost of production, which is exactly what people are looking at, importers in Japan and Korea now, and then negotiating a premium to that, then at least as the offtakes come off, then people are used to talking about hydrogen and ammonia numbers. So I think that'll be quite a helpful way of looking at things. The other thing is that if people look at a benchmark and negotiating a premium relative to that, that's going to be a big help because everyone starts in a very similar boat. And it'll also help to facilitate additional trade and additional supply. For example, if there was a US benchmark into Asia, for example, that's something the Middle East can look at and negotiate versus as a delta to that. And the same for other regions as well. So I think that it's an important time to have benchmarks, clearly visible ones. We are launching one. And if you would like any further information, we're over at the stands. My email address is up here. And happy to take any questions after this from any of you. Thank you.